I'll just share my screen. Right. Have you got the presenter view? Oh, yep. Cool. No. Are you happy for me to kick off, Kathleen?
Yeah, I think go for it.
Yep, cool.
Join you.
Welcome everyone to the Dry Times Smart Moves webinar. This is the first of 3 webinars. The next 2 will come in a month apart from each other. I'd like to start off by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Wiradjuri people, and we welcome elders past, present and emerging. Tonight's webinar is supported through a collaboration between Holbrook Landcare Network and Murray LLS. Tonight's webinar and the following webinars, for anyone that joined this time last year, Holbrook Landcare ran a similar event called Crappy Seasons Conversations. And whilst the name is a bit different this time, the aim is still the same in that we're wanting to get producers and farmers online with an expert to get some insights and ask any questions as we transition through the seasons. Online tonight we have some of the team from Murray LLS, including Beck Stacey and Mark Corrigan, and we also have Jill Kelly from AHN Consulting. The run for tonight, Beck will kick off with a bit of a farming forecaster update for around the region, and then we'll switch over to Jill. Throughout the webinar, the Q&A and the raise hand settings should be enabled for you to ask any questions. Please put them through at any time. We'll monitor those as they come through. And another reminder that tonight's webinar is recorded. So if you have any issues or questions, please get in touch with myself or with Kathleen Bartlett from Murray LLS, and we're happy to talk through anything. With all of that said, I might hand over to Beck to get things going.
Sure, no worries. Thank you.
I'll stop sharing.
Get this going. And I'm hoping my internet holds up too. So, yeah, I'm Rebecca Stacey. I'm based over in Deniliquin with Murray Local Land Services in the ag production team, and just covering off on a few things around farming forecaster. So I hope these slides are showing up. Can someone give me the thumbs up? Yep, cool. All right, so farming forecaster, I guess a quick intro to what it is. So it's a decision support tool. It's a web-based platform, www.farmingforecaster.com, and it's free to access for everyone. So there's different soil moisture probes and weather stations across the region, and multiple regions in New South Wales have them. Tasmania has them as well. They're hosted on landholder farms. And then on the side of that, we build a pasture model that, you know, sits alongside the enterprise information for that site. So anytime you want, you can go into Farming Forecaster online and just have a look. If you know what region you're in, so Murray LLS shows up, Riverina has sites as well. Go into the map, you can either look at it from the map platform, or if you know there's a site near yours, near your farm, you can just look it up in a drop-down menu and see the information for that site. So tonight I'll be talking about the pasture model a bit. And so the pasture forecast, it's developed in GrassGrow, which is a another program that you can input information into and extract a model out of. So to build the grass grow model, which shows up on Farming Forecaster as a pasture forecast, we input the pasture information for that site, so pasture species. It extracts weather and climate information from a 5 kilometre silo grid, which is approved weather stations and information there. There's also soil type information sits alongside all our sites, so that information feeds into the model as well. And then we get the livestock enterprise information for the host site. So the type of stock they're running, the DSE that they're running it at, or the stocking rate they're running it at, sorry, and, you know, their lambing or calving time of year, when they're weaning, that all helps go into the model. And then based on the inputs and what we're extracting out with the stock, we get this forecast. So it'll show up on Farming Forecaster for a 4-month period, and you can have a look at that and see, based on what your starting point is for today and the current situation or the weather information, it plots it out, runs a set of models, and then it'll also give you percentile lines across the graph. So over in the east, which I've based tonight's talk on, we've got 3 current sites showing up. So there's one at Mundaroo, one at Little Billabong, and one at Mountain Creek. And there is additional sites that will come on board shortly in the coming months. But so the current outlook for Mundaroo, and just a quick description of how this looks. So this is the pasture model that will show up on Farming Forecaster. And if you click through from the front page to the more pasture detail, then you'll get these dates along the bottom. So it's exactly the same model, but it'll just show up in a bigger format and you'll get the dates along the bottom. So it's a 4-month forecast. The black line that starts out here is what that comes up weekly, and that's showing what the system is, you know, what's currently happening on the ground. And these percentile lines, so the blue line is like your 90th percentile. So that's your, you know, if you have a really good bumper season, that's where that line will show up, and that's plotting out for the next 4 months. This shaded information that sits behind it is based on historic years, so 30 years of historical data. So from this, you can look and go, sure, it's pretty average. We're not in the top 50% of our years, which is the green. So the green is the 50 to 90%. This yellow shaded section is your 25 to 50%. And the red is like your lowest. So that's your 10 to 25%. If you're underneath the red shaded area, you're in your lowest 10% of historical information that's sitting behind there. So what I've outlined here, this is based on the climatology, this is modelling 30 sets and drawing the line at the relevant percentiles across those 30 sets of data based on historical runs. If you click on the Access S model, it will do 33 models based on the weather forecast, like future forecasts based out of BOM. So you can have a look at each on the live Farming Forecaster site. I've just run the climatology ones for the moment. They're fairly similar, like there is some, they show a small difference, but not vast differences at the moment, which is good. So the Mundaroo site, it's based on a Phalaris subclover mix. They're running 500 kilo composite cows and with 17.5 DSE per hectare. So that's the information that's gone into building this model. And what we'd look at here, so it's tracking along in the 25 to 50% of their years or their historical years. It's not great, it's low, but it's not right down in this white section at the bottom either. But what we look at here, so where the lines are staying close together, that's sort of indicating that, you know, if the lines stay relatively close, then that pasture will keep going off the soil moisture. But when they start to separate, that's where you're looking at influence of rainfall. So if you want to just keep an eye on the yellow line, so that's been drawn at the 50th percentile for the models that have run, you're looking at getting through to the middle of October, you know, before no rainfall, you might start to drop off down into this red area. Average rainfall, you'll tick along through till, what's that, early December. Or if you have some really good rainfall, you might make it up to this top section where you could get up to 4,000 kilos of green. So that's the other thing to remember, is that this is looking at green herbage in the system. It's not looking at the whole paddock. Like it's not plotting your dead matter and your green matter. It's only green matter. So in terms of a decision point, you know, you might look at this and go, oh, we could be all right. But you might want to look and go, okay, so what's our options come middle of October if we don't get average rainfall, or we don't get better than average rainfall? You know, what are my options going to be? So similarly, I've just pulled this off for the little Billabong site, and anyone online, you guys will know where where your farm is relative to these other sites. So again, this one's based on Phalaris sub-annuals mix. Sorry, skipped along. It's modelled with an enterprise of 72 kilo composite ewes. There's information in the background that sits there around when they're lambing, when they're weaning, that sort of thing. I haven't pulled that information onto this slide, sorry, but it influences this pasture model. And they're running 13 DSE per hectare. So for these guys, it's looking like their soil moisture will cut out more like middle of September. So come mid to late September, early October, this is where you're looking more for the rainfall influence here. Again, they're ticking along maybe just at the 50th percentile. Like it's not, you know, it's not dire, but they're used to spending 50 to 90% of their years up here. And I shouldn't say it's not dire because I'm not over there, obviously. But this is where you're sort of looking to make what's our options beyond this point. And have a look. You can click on these other percentile lines if you want. So you can click to draw a line at the 75th percentile or the 25th percentile. So that'll just give you the different options of where the models run. But for ease of looking at it, these are the ones that come up automatically, and I've just kept them as, you know, really good, average, and far less than ideal. So then Mountain Creek, again, their, you know, soil moisture is probably going to cut out somewhere around 16th of September. Looking at this at the moment, they're possibly tracking up a bit higher, but this also gives you an indication of, you know, at what point is it really going to drop off too. So even if they get great rainfall, better than average, it's still, you know, this model will redraw, but for the current 4-month period, it'll still fall off, you know, around that mid to late November. But if they have really good rainfall, they're falling off from a lot higher point than where it is currently. So if it ticks along average, just keeps following this yellow line. Not saying it's great by any stretch, but this is where you can look for, all right, somewhere around mid to late September, what's our options going to be? And then come, you know, middle of October, when it really starts to drop off, if nothing's happened, what are you doing? And again, Mountain Creek, it's based off Phalaris, subclover and annual mix, composite ewes, and 10.5 DSE. So in terms of relating this to your farms, you know what sort of enterprise you're running. Have a look at the enterprise information that sits behind these models just by clicking through to more pasture detail. And then that'll give you the information and you can sort of look at it and go, oh, yeah, I'm similar. I've got a similar soil type, or this might tweak it. Have a look at the different sites, see what they're all showing up and what they're based on. In terms of what it means for you, you can use it, to have a look at, so what's your time of lambing, calving, weaning? When's your peak nutritional demand? When's the pressure going to come on for that pasture? What's your best case scenario and what's your worst case scenarios look like? So where are you sitting currently in terms of that model? How much time have you got before that soil moisture runs out? When's it going to get critical? And then what are your options from there? So have you got the ability to feed stock? Do you need to sell some? Great season, maybe you've got the capacity to increase your numbers. Wouldn't that be nice? But that's sort of the decisions that you can look at and think about. And in terms of using the information, it's modelled for 4 months. It draws the black line for what's currently happening, and that catches up weekly. But you can look at that model and get a bit of a gauge of when the pressure might really come on in terms of if the season doesn't come through. You might be looking at the red line, the 10th percentile, or you might be, coming through with a really good option. So that's where it's there to support your decisions and help you get a bit of a thinking for the future planning in terms of what your next 4 months might look like and when the pressure really might come on. And then in terms of, if you're not over in that far eastern section in the hills there, these are just our sites across to, there's one on the edge here at Corowa. The circles are full sites, so they're soil moisture probe, weather station, and pasture model. The square sites are just a virtual site, so they only have a pasture model. But the Rand site that'll come online with a soil moisture probe soon. And there's others have been installed recently, sort of around this central area, which will come online in the next few months as well. So if you're in that kind of area, as opposed to over towards Mundaroo, Little Billabong areas, then there will be information coming online for you guys soon too. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Beck. Any questions from anyone? We'll switch over. Mark, yeah?
But can you just go back to the model? So basically looking at where we're at now, so I suppose if we sort of have an average rainfall year, we're probably just going to be slightly below that 50% herbage match following that yellow line. And I suppose is that correct?
Yeah, so that's a good way to describe it. Like if you have an average year, so average conditions or median conditions. So this yellow line has been drawn at the 50th percentile line. So if you follow the yellow line and look where that's tracking, it'll have you in, where the yellow line is tracking along the top of that yellow and green transition. That's at the, at the top of that 50th percentile. If it's tracking more down through this middle bit, you might be looking more in the, 35%, so a bit lower. What's the Mundaroo one's out the top, so it goes out the top come late November, even just on an average season, it's suggesting that you might get out into, or average rainfall, you might get out into the maybe the 50 to 60, 70 percentile of years. That green section's in your 50 to 90%. But yeah, if you look at the yellow line as a average, average outlook, because that's where it's drawn it. It's modelled 30 sets and it's drawn the line at the 15th point for each set. That's where So you can look at it from that perspective and go, based on average, we might be okay. Because if that yellow line was coming down into the red, you'd be quite concerned. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks, Beck. Yeah, it's just I
Yep.
suppose with the prediction of potentially above average rain, if it becomes early enough, there's potentially that herbage mass will push up towards the blue. So it gives producers an idea of potential what herbage mass there is, and probably compared to say last year where the forecast wasn't really positive, so those lines would be coming down the other ways. Whereas example, the yellow probably coming down into the red last year.
Yeah.
So it's just giving producers an idea of where we're at and where the potential is.
Yeah, certainly. And that's where it's good to have that shading behind it and understand the historical information behind it, in terms of it gives you a reference point of where you're tracking and yeah, are you in your lowest section or are you actually doing all right?
We've had a question come through from Paul. What are the options if there is still good soil moisture, but the pasture is finishing off due to normal maturity into early summer? Any insights, Beck?
I guess that comes back to sort of your pasture quality. So if it drops off early summer, you need to make your decisions based on what you're trying to achieve and what your stock and your paddocks are looking like. But if your pasture's starting to go off earlier in summer than it normally would from a quality perspective, it'll affect your stock performance and what you might look at doing.
Yep, not lovely. Thank you. Right, Jill, your turn. I'll hand over to you.
Right, thank you very much. Hopefully, I'll just share my screen. All right, hopefully everybody can see that. So thank you very much for having me. Just a bit of background about who I am and where I come from. I'm Gillian Kelly. I am from Coonamble in northwest New South Wales, and we have the dubious honour of being really good at drought. So our average rainfall, they say, is about 500 mils, but it's actually a flood plus a drought divided by 2. So we've got an extremely variable climate, and you never quite know what the season's going to bring. Our last drought went for 3 years, so we got really good at feeding stock under really harsh circumstances. And I guess the LLS and Holbrook Landcare have invited me to talk today about my experience coming out of drought. So I'm a vet by degree and then a nutritionist by passion and also by necessity because of where I live and work. And I spent 6 years in private vet clinics. Then I spent 11 years as the district vet for local land services at Coonamble. And then 3 years ago, I left and I started my own business. And I work with clients all over the place on proactive livestock production initiatives because what I've worked out is you're better off to feed them and look after them appropriately so that you don't have to post-mortem them, as much as I do love a good post-mortem. So I hear you've had rain, and I've been helping quite a few producers with rations and things like that in Victoria. So I'm very happy that spring is coming, the weather's warming up. But from what I can gather with the guys I've been talking to in the south, it's rained, but now what are we going to do? And my question is always, has it rained enough? So now, forgive me, I do come from this droughty background, so you're gonna think I'm the doomsday prepper from the north. I really do hope that you get that average or above average season, but I want you to not think it's all just miraculously over in one fall of rain either. So has it rained enough? The clickers aren't working. Let's have a look here. Sorry, guys. Can you still see me or hear me?
Yeah, we've still got you, Jill.
Yeah,
still got the has it rained screen.
Yeah, my computer's just having a little moment. Sorry, now it wants to shut itself down. Sorry, guys. Oh, here we go. Can you see that?
Yep, you're back on.
I'm back on. It is trying to shut down PowerPoint, so we'll see if it lasts. Oh, there we go. We can practice and practice, but it'll all go wrong on the night, won't it? Right, are we back?
Yep.
Okay.
There we go.
All right, so it rains, and obviously the first thing that comes is short green pick. So that short green pick is really nutritious in terms of energy, but it's up here at this 75% percentile in terms of digestibility, but it's also super high in moisture. And if it's presented in a way that is a short green carpet, this picture at the top is just an old slide from DPI, and what it's showing is pasture at 500 kilos of dry matter per hectare. And if that's presented as a short green carpet, this is a sheep, but it could be a cow, whatever species. They actually have to spend 11 hours grazing, and they can only harvest about 0.7 of a kilo per day for a sheep or a DSE. But if that 500 kilos of dry matter per hectare is presented as big tufts, even if there's bare ground in between, that sheep can get a really big mouthful. He only has to spend 8 hours a day grazing, and he gets double the amount of intake. So a cow has only got about 25,000 bites in her per day. Besides that, after that, her masticatory muscles in her cheeks fatigue, and she thinks, bugger it, I'll just go and sit under a tree and have a camp. I've run out of puff. And the other thing that we don't take into account often enough, we work out how many megajoules the animal needs per day to stay alive and to grow and to lactate, and if it's a sheep, grow wool, if it's a cow, feed its calf. But what we don't take into account is all the walking that they have to do to get that pick. And the additional equation to the energy thing is it's an additional 5 megajoules of energy for every 1 kilometre they walk. So it's pretty significant. If they're chasing pick and they're walking a lot to get the grass, they often walk more and expend more energy than what they take in. So beware the short green pick. It's highly nutritious, high in energy, but also high in moisture. So it might only be 20% dry matter or 15% dry matter. The rest of it's moisture, and trying to live on watermelon is not a very good strategy for staying fat and healthy. Now, anyone who's ever been to one of my nutrition days knows that I talk about energy and how much I love it. Because even before our last drought, everyone was obsessed with protein. And I think the nutrition industry, both the human nutrition industry and the cattle and the livestock nutrition industry, is all obsessed with protein. And so farmers would ring me up and say, oh, I've bought this really good hay. It's 11% protein. And I'd say, that's cool, but in a drought, I want to know what the energy is first and foremost. So just so that you remember it, we just say energy is queen, right? So it's got a crown and it runs the show. And we always design all of our rations around energy. Closely followed by protein though, so don't discount that. Protein is really important, but it comes second. Then fibre, then minerals, and then vitamins, in that order. So somebody mentioned in the questions early weaning. I haven't covered a lot in here on early weaning, but it's a thought that you need to keep in the back of your head in case, as we just learnt from Beck, those rainfall predictions don't come off and we end up in that lower percentile for pasture growth, and we have to make some tactical decisions. Weaning might be one of them. And if we're designing a weaning ration, that's where protein becomes important, and particularly the quality of the protein that we're giving. So for an early weaner, we don't want to rely on urea or a really cheap ordinary source of protein. We want high quality proteins in those diets. But for everything else, energy's first, protein comes a very big second. Now, there was also a question that came through about how important minerals were for weaker heifers. I think the question answers the question in itself. If they're a weak heifer, they're deficient in energy first and foremost. So just refer back to this triangle. Yes, they do need minerals, but that weak heifer needs energy first and foremost to regain strength. Takes energy to walk around, takes energy to push a calf out, takes energy to lactate. So energy is more important, and I'd rather see you spend your money on energy than on minerals and blocks and powders and things like that. They're important, but they come further down the triangle. Now, please interrupt me, guys, if there's questions that come in. We can stop at any time and take questions. So let's get a bit more specific. What if we've got a cow with a calf at foot on some short green pick? And this is a photo that a client sent me the other day. What do we think about her? Well, let's be specific. We know energy's queen. So let's say she's a 550 kilo cow and she's lactating. She's got a calf at foot. So she herself needs 60 megajoules, but then she needs energy for lactation. And the equation is 5 megajoules for every litre of milk produced. So if she's producing about 6 litres a day, that's another 30 megajoules. So she's a 90 megajoule cow. And we know a lactating female needs 11 to 14% protein. Now, we could need more if she's walking a lot. Remember, 5 megajoules for every kilometre walked. We could need more if she's lost a fair bit of condition over this dry winter, and we'd like to pick her up a bit. But that's a tough ask when you're a lactating female, because if we feed her extra, some of those are genetically going to pour that into milk, and some of those are going to genetically put it on their backs. So she can go either way on that one if we feed her extra. But she's also likely to need to get in calf. So we really want her on a rising plane for reconception. And a rising plane, I don't think, is often specifically described enough. But in my book, it's maintenance plus 20%. So if we want her to be on a rising plane, we want to give her that 90 megajoules plus 20% to get her to reconceive. So a rising plane. And remember, she's on short green pick. So we already know it's really watery, and we already know it's really short, and it's going to take a lot of harvesting. But it's high in energy and it's high in protein. So what's she getting? Now, ordinarily, we'd say she'd eat 3% of her body weight, because that's the old farmer's tale, isn't it? That's what everybody says. And if there's complicating factors like fibre or roughage, so if she was on dry, stalky tropical pasture, she probably wouldn't eat that because she'd be full of fibre, but that's not the case here. The case here is that it's watery and it's short. So she's probably only going to be able to harvest half of that 3%, just like that sheep up in the top figure. And so if she can only eat 1.5% of her body weight, she's going to harvest 8.25 kilos of dry matter. And we say it's 10 megajoules of energy. So she can physically harvest 82.5 megajoules. And it's really high in protein. Mostly things that are green and lush and actively growing are pretty high in protein. So we're a bit short, aren't we? So she's a little bit short. So if you did the technical equation, she's probably going to lose a little bit of weight per day, or she could just reduce a bit of milk production, or her body is kind of clever. Her rumen is really clever. So what it might do is it might just cleave up some protein molecules and use the carbohydrate skeleton as an energy source. So she might cope okay. You might get away with it. But there are consequences because we're not doing it right. So she's almost getting enough energy, but when we feed energy, it goes into a big fermentation vat. and the microbes go to town on it, and they can turn that carbohydrate molecule, whether it's from the grass or whether it's from a supplement or wherever that energy is coming from, it'll ferment the carbohydrate molecule into a volatile fatty acid. And there's 3 types. Propionate is for growth, and that's why we feed a lot of feedlot animals grain, so we get a lot of propionate from starch. The other volatile fatty acid is acetate, and it's great for lactation, and we get it from roughage. And then the 3rd type is butyrate. We get it from things like molasses, and it feeds the rumen wall. So because we get to be really good nutrition managers in drought, we know that we can skew that volatile fatty acid profile however we want, depending on what we want from our animal. And in this case of this cow, we'd like her to have a volatile fatty acid profile skewed towards acetate because we want her to lactate. She's got to feed a calf. But in this case on that short green pick, it probably doesn't have a lot of fibre in it, and we haven't got a volatile fatty acid profile skewed towards acetate. So you might get a calf that looks a bit ordinary. She's not milking like she should. We've got plenty of protein, we haven't got enough fibre, and in that short green pick, we've probably got imbalanced minerals. So high potassium, low magnesium, low calcium, low sodium. So we could have some calcium or some magnesium deficiency complications. And she's probably okay with vitamins. There's plenty of vitamin A and E in green feed. Hopefully the sun's out, she's getting some vitamin D. And if your rumen's healthy, it'll make some B vitamins for you. So in summary, if we're on green pick with a cow and calf at foot with no supplement, she probably needs some roughage, some energy density, and some minerals. So something to think about. We can get away with inadequate diets for a short period, but it can't go on for too long. Now, this is another scenario that the LLS guys have asked me to cover, which is cows that have been, the hay, let's put a scenario forward, the hay or the silage ran out. And so we've turned all the cows out to calve onto the pasture, and we know the pasture's not high enough yet. It's still green and short. And we had this, lick or syrup or molassesy supplement. In this case, it's condensed distillers solubles, and we've put that out with them as well, but we've got no hay. So what is condensed distillers solubles? Well, it's a bit of a syrup, and I don't know if you can read that, but basically it's a syrup, so it's very watery. So it's quite similar to the green feed itself. It's sugary and it's watery. So it's only 68% moisture. I haven't got an energy figure there on that feed test, but it's 8% crude protein. It's got a lot of phosphorus in it, not much calcium, and it's really high in sulfur. So what are we doing to the rumen? How many rules are we breaking by feeding these cows with a calf at foot on short green pick some syrup? Well, she's getting her energy. Whoa, lots of energy. So those rumen bugs are going to be all revved up, but we still haven't got a volatile fatty acid profile skewed towards acetate for milk production, and it's still quite watery. So she's going to have to drink quite a lot of volume and still graze a lot of that green pick and chase pick to get her daily needs probably. Now, her diet, once we mix in that lush green feed with some of this syrup, the protein in that's going to be okay once we balance that out. But we still keep coming back, there's not enough fibre, not enough effective fibre. We've got imbalanced minerals, particularly that sulphur. If she depends too heavily on that condensed distillers solubles, that sulphur in that is actually toxic. And she's probably okay for vitamins. We don't really know, but she's probably all right. So she still needs roughage, energy density, dry matter, and minerals. And a lot of these syrups, their whole point in life is to be a complementary feed. So they have a little bit of syrup and then they go and eat more roughage. That's how they work. Whereas with these girls, we haven't really got enough roughage and they will still get into nutritional complications. Now, I've covered pellets because there were questions about pellets in the questions before the session. So let's just say we're still feeding pellets to these guys. So pellets typically are made on well, either grains or some form of readily fermentable carbohydrate. So they're getting plenty of energy, and pellets are usually about 90% dry matter, so they're pretty energy dense, and that's good. But look out, you might have a bit of an acidosis risk. So acidosis is just a carbohydrate overload that the bugs in the rumen can't deal with, and you get a drop in pH, a build-up of lactic acid, and the animal gets pretty crook and can die. And it usually occurs with either sudden introduction, change of batch, or slug feeding. So feeding, twice a week or something like that. So we need to manage that if we're going to feed pellets on this green grass, because that green grass is rocket fuel too. It's going to provide lots of readily fermentable carbohydrates to their gut, and it's going to drop their pH marginally, not enough to cause problems, but if you go and then tip a heap of starch in there, you're going to probably compound the acidosis risk. So we need to manage that. You're going to have pretty good protein in that diet. You still haven't got enough fibre for acidosis prevention or milk production. You've probably got some imbalanced minerals, so high phosphorus versus calcium, and you might get some trouble with that because these girls are pouring calcium and magnesium into their milk. And we don't know about vitamins unless you get a feed test on these pellets, because they're all different and they all contain different things. So do your homework and get a feed test. So pellets and green pick aren't a bad thing, but she still needs some well-controlled feed delivery. We still need to ration it out to her in a pretty controlled way and do our megajoule equations. And she still needs some roughage to balance the acidosis risk and to get her to lactate. And we need to sort those minerals out. And I just included cottonseed here because I know you guys are reasonably close to the Riverina, and cottonseed's popular with cattle. But cottonseed on green pick isn't the greatest combination either. I mean, she is getting energy, and that cottonseed is energy dense because it's 90% dry matter and above 13 megajoules of energy per kilo of dry matter. So it's good stuff, but it's really high in oil. And that's why it's a self-limiting complementary feed, and cattle producers love it because the cow is meant to eat 3 or 4 kilos of cottonseed, and then she'll walk away and go and eat 6 kilos of roughage or grass or hay. But in this case, we haven't got 6 kilos of grass or roughage for her to easily eat. So it's not going to work. Her volatile fatty acid profile still won't be skewed towards acetate for milk production. There is a bit of fibre in there, like the fluff on it, but it's still not effective fibre necessarily, and there's not enough roughage there for such a complementary feed. That cottonseed's going to drive grass intake, and she can't harvest enough. And we've still got imbalanced minerals, so she needs roughage and minerals. So if you've turned your cows out onto green pick, we need quick pasture growth. We need it to grow ahead of them. And sometimes drought pastures don't grow as expected if they've been hammered over the winter with hooves and compaction and density. And so I know that the roughage has run out and that it's expensive to go and buy, but hopefully I've just presented a few case studies here that show just how important it is, even though you've got green grass. I'll get off my high horse now. So it is September, and this is a very generic feed curve from the Evergraze website for the southwest slopes of New South Wales. And what it shows us is in September, it should be growing at 50 kilos of dry matter per hectare. Now, your forecaster that Beck talked about earlier will be a much more immediate, real-time, local way of measuring this. But I just want to plant the seed. It should be growing at a certain rate. So is it? That's September, and that's about roughly 50 kilos of dry matter per hectare per day. So we just want to make sure, is it? And there's different ways that you can measure that, either yourself with a pasture square, using SIBO labs, or using your forecaster. But what some of the studies that have shown, and this was a report prepared for local land services with the Saving Our Soils project, was that there was, if you grazed it low to the ground, that caused short delays less than 6 weeks delay, but still a delay in the date at which your pastures attain more than 70% ground cover. So if you've had a prolonged dry period and grazing pressure on those paddocks, it may delay your pasture growth. So your pasture growth might not match what the forecaster says or what those generic values say. And so we just need to adjust our stocking rate and our expectations of that paddock accordingly, I guess. Now, as I said, our drought went for 3 years. So we had animals that we'd fed, they were 2.5 and they'd never eaten green grass in their life. So we had plenty of hangovers from drought. It doesn't just go away. I just wanted to mention a few of them because the thing is there's no textbook for drought, is there? None of this is documented. So I just wanted to mention it, some of the things we saw post-drought. So our drought broke in February 2020. And everything was locked in confinement virtually. We had no dry mattle, we had no ground cover left, we had nothing. Even though we locked them up, it all fell apart and the roos ate it and it all blew away. So there was a lot of bare ground and there was no grass left. And we held animals in confinement for, a month after it rained to allow the pasture to really come away, and we wouldn't graze it until stubby height. That was what we were aiming for, to allow it to get its roots down and re-establish. And it's mostly native country too. But about 6 months after that drought broke, I had a farm manager from Quambone ring me and say, these sheep still aren't doing well, there's something wrong with them. And these sheep had been fed for 2.5 years in a feedlot. And we cut them up and looked at their rumens, and there was still, that's just a histology result from a lab. And it just showed that there was still evidence of grain scarring and grain damage, even though those animals had been on green grass for 6 months. So prolonged grain feeding can have long-lasting effects on the production of animals, and I think that's pretty undocumented and pretty unrecognised. Especially these animals had been really well looked after. We don't think that animal had a grain poisoning event. It was just a normal animal that ate grain for a long period. So bear that in mind. Another hangover post-drought was poor reproductive rates. Now, the good thing about our drought, it went for so long, we had a real rough go at things in 2018 and we got much better in 2019. So the first year, 2019, there was some pretty poor reproductive rates because we underfed. We fed starvation rations and we did it, we cut corners. And so this is just a graph that shows the fat score of cows and the percentage cycling. So a cow's pregnant for 9 months of the year, which means she's got 90 days to get her act together, calve, lactate, recover, and reconceive. Otherwise, she'll be empty at preg testing on the next go round. So we really aim for our animals to be about fat score 3 or condition score 3, which is 7 to 22 mils of fat at the P8 site. And what that ensures is that 91% of those girls are able to come on heat and potentially reconceive at 90 days. But if they're a bit light, so 1s and 2s, now these are girls that you can see ribs, you can see that seam between the muscle bellies on their hind legs, and you can see some hip bones. Only 66% of them are cycling at 90 days. So if they got light, we're likely to have a poor reconception rate. So there's ongoing effects. Now, the other thing that we have found with reproductive rates, and this is a bit of an unproven theory from Geoffrey Fordyce, who is a really well-known and well-regarded cattle vet from Northern Australia, is that the egg that is produced from the female starts its little embryonic creation about 6 months prior to fertilisation. So if you imagine that cow, she's potentially got a calf at foot during that period, and she may be doing it pretty tough. She might have lost a lot of weight. Her calf might be starting to look woody. She's, doing it pretty tough. That is the point at which the embryo that is going to be reconceived at her next joining with the bull is being created. And because she doesn't have enough energy to even maintain normal bodily functions, that little egg is probably going to be a bit defective. And so even if things improve and we get a great season after that event, that little egg that started its journey back then is probably going to be a bit ordinary, and that may affect your reproductive rate at the next go round. And I think we saw that here in sheep last year. So we had a pretty tough winter in 23. It forgot to rain between February and October, so we fed all through lambing. And now a lot of our lambs here are born in June, July, because we don't get terribly cold. And then when we went to reconceive around Christmas time, we just got poor results, even though we got 200 mils of rain in November and had green grass coming at our ears. But it's all about when that little egg starts its creation and how tough we do it, which just goes to show the emphasis of feeding our breeders really well through lambing, or through calving. Even if you think, oh yeah, the season will catch us, we'll let them lose a bit of weight and then we'll pick it up with the season. There can be ongoing hangover effects experienced from allowing those precious animals to lose condition at that really key time. The other thing was we, as I said, our drought was much longer, and so we did have some heifers that when they came around time for their first joining, they'd been completely grain-fed their whole life. We saw a lot of dystochias in those heifers. So, yeah, I don't know, we probably overfed them. We probably fed them too much grain and for too long, and we probably, I mean, a heifer really should grow at about 700 grams from the day she's born until the day she calves. We probably had some big high growth rates and some big low growth, like we probably had a bit of a bumpy curve, and we probably fed them too much of the wrong stuff, but we did have a lot of dystochias in drought raised heifers. So that was something that we had to wear at the end of it. And we were precious, like they were precious to us because we had dropped our breeder cow numbers to about 30% as a district. And so those heifers are really important to get us back on track, and we had trouble with them. So we could have a whole day on this topic, but I've been given just a half an hour. So I just want to finish up by just saying droughts don't just happen. They sneak up. They start as a feed gap. Okay, they start as a period in Beck's forecaster where the pasture growth rate drops into that lower percentile band. So they creep in. So the pasture starts to get low. The pasture starts to get poorer in quality. The stock lose weight. The sheds and the silos start to get empty. People start to get worn out. The bank account starts to look a bit ordinary, and the dams start to dry up. So it creeps, right? So what does return to drought look like? They also creep out. It doesn't just happen overnight with a miraculous fall of rain. This is what we expect at the end of it. Grass that grows as expected. So healthy soils and healthy pastures, money in the bank and cash flow and a stable business. We want our cows in body condition score 3 again. And if yours are in condition score 2, that's about 80 kilos that they need to gain, which takes a lot of megajoules and a lot of grass. And we've got our breeder numbers back up. We've got hay and silos and silage pits and everything full. And the other thing that we experienced post-drought was a mouse plague. So we filled everything back up and then the mice ate it anyway. So we had to do it again. So that was, I don't know if that happens after every drought, but it happened after ours. We want full dams and full water storage and everything back on track. And we want people that are okay, but also that came through the drought with a good experience so that they're not so scarred that they don't want to do it again. Because I think that we've become more and more variable in our climate, and the seasonal variability that we experience has influenced how we run our farms up here. And that drought has we've only just recovered from it. It took us several really good seasons and good years to get back on track. So keep managing the hand that you're dealt. Now, I was going to put here, it's not over till the fat lady sings, but I thought that might not be overly correct. So there's a fellow who's a baseball coach called Yogi Berra, and he says it ain't over till it's over. So keep monitoring and keep managing the hand you're dealt. You might not go straight back to running the same system that you've run, year in, year out forever. You might just have to keep managing your pasture growth rate. Is it on track? What about the body condition score of your animals? Are they back where you want them? What about your stocking rate? If your pasture's not growing as quickly, you might need to alter your stocking rate. That early wean in October might be needed. Is the feed you're supplying meeting the nutritional needs of the animals? Don't skimp on preg testing or scanning. We're lucky now to have like OptiWeighs and, weigh scales in most crushers and things like that. Just keep monitoring your average daily gain and growth rates and things like that. And just keep being really strategic in terms of culling, restocking, trading for cash flow, and supplementary feeding if what's in the paddock isn't what your animals quite need. So that's me. I'll leave it there, but I'm awfully happy to take as many questions as we've got time for. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. We've got a question in the chat. How did those heifers recover after the dystochias from overfeeding? We had similar.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. To be honest, most animals who experienced dystochias got culled from the herd. So the calf may have been pulled or may have been caesareaned, but those animals left the herd. So don't know. And we haven't had the problem since. So it was definitely a drought thing.
Oh, lovely. Why did you cull?
Why did we cull? I guess it's just good practice. Anything that has trouble doesn't belong. The risk of damage inside that heifer that might make it difficult for her to reconceive. Yeah, they were just the decisions made by the farmers at the time. I'd say that's pretty standard practice to sell anything that's had a dystochia.
Right, fair. Thank you, Jill. That was great. Lots of insights, lots of tips and tricks. I got lots out of it, especially the stubby height. I feel like there's lots of rules for pasture measurement, but that was a really good one. Everyone, please keep sending your questions through either in the chat or in the QA box. Microphones are turned off at the moment, but if you would like us to turn them on for you to talk to Jill or to Mark or to Beck, please let us know and we can do that for you.
I'll just stop sharing my screen. There you go.
No, lovely. In the registration, there was a comment, most efficient way to deliver roughage to a large number of cattle, not in a mixer. Do you have any tips, Jill?
It's hard. They're wasteful buggers, aren't they? Good, yeah, hay racks, but I've never met the perfect hay rack. And it depends on numbers and it depends on time and labour and what you've got to feed it out. We did a lot in open shuttles. So we'd put cottonseed underneath and hay on top and things like that. And you can fit 8 cows around a shuttle. I think you call them IBCs, don't you? Like what chemical comes in, the 1-ton shuttles. So we did a lot with cut-off shuttles. Laying biscuits out on the ground is okay. They will waste quite a lot. And that's why I get booed every time I say this in the South. But I really like rations that are designed around a energy-dense, rich commodity like pellets or cottonseed or grains or something like that, and then hay becomes the added extra. So we're not feeding vast volumes of roughage indiscriminately with no sums. It's not just ad lib, have as much as you want, because invariably they just camp in it. But we work out how we're going to allocate those 90 megajoules. So that might look like, 3 or 4 kilos of pellets and 3 or 4 kilos of hay, and that's measured out, and those animals get that. They might not get it every day. They might still get fed 2 or 3 times a week, but it's quite measured and they're made to clean it all up. But it's really tricky, especially when you get into big numbers.
And also this year we sort of had just enough rain to be a pain, so it became boggy and a bit messy. So and that became difficult to manage as well. Just enough rain came in late autumn.
Yeah, and look, you guys, you probably will return to normal consistent rainfall that does what it's meant to do. But if, like us, you are so variable, you need to set, like, we all here should have troughing to feed enough cattle. And if we don't get wet, we don't get wet. We don't get wet. We don't get the wet winters like you guys do. But maybe, you know, an area like with feeding along a fence line, so that you don't, with a hot wire or something, so that you don't actually have to drive into the pens. And just, if feeding is going to become part of your system, just getting a bit better set up to do so that it's an efficient use of resources and time, I guess.
Yeah. We've had another question. Did you see more than usual bloat on the back of a dry autumn/winter with hungry cows? The proviso is we have completely different pastures to you guys, okay? Ours are all native. We get rainfall all year round and we don't get cold winters. So we grow lots of grass. Oh, well, not lots of grass, but grass at all times of the year. So winter is often our best season on our native country because we grow lots of medics. But yes, if we eat all our dry matter through autumn and end up bare, we will bloat cattle like you wouldn't believe through winter. And bloat is a very difficult problem to stop. Roughage is the best answer, but again, expensive, difficult to provide, and especially when it's really wet. And a lot of the other licks and things like that are worth a go, but some of them, well, if you're putting them in the water, like oils and things, often they're not drinking because the pasture is so lush. And the other thing is, if they're licks, some of them are based on products like monensin, which are really bitter, and so it can be difficult to get universal uptake by all the animals to prevent bloat in every single animal in the mob. So bloat's one of probably the trickiest conditions we see, and we don't have a perfect answer. We do get bloat years, and if you've eaten all your dry grass to go with that lush green stuff, that's a very high risk situation, I'd say.
Yeah, I think down here this year it's been variable. We've had some really good ryegrass germinations, and but even now, so the property today, there's hardly any clover, but they're blowing still. So it's amazing how it doesn't need a lot of clover to blow. But generally, we did have a bit of rain in March where we had quite a good germination that died out. So the actual clover this year has been very variable depending on how you've looked after your pastures.
Yeah, and I should probably explain what bloat is, because everyone just imagines they get a big burp or fart inside them. That's not actually the whole truth. What happens is they eat a lot of lush carbohydrate. So it could be clover, because clover's actually got bloat-forming compounds in its leaves, but any lush carbohydrate will do it. So short green ryegrass, whatever it is, it's all readily fermentable carbohydrate that's soft and mushy, and it doesn't take much for the rumen bugs to ferment it into volatile fatty acids, and those acids are acids. And so when we get a big woof of them in the room and we drop the pH, and strep bovis is the bug that causes bloat, and it loves acid conditions in the rumen. So if you give too much short green anything to an animal, you're putting them at bloat risk because you're dropping the rumen pH. Now that holds back weight gain and production, but it also increases the bloat risk. So the way to stop that is to raise the pH of the rumen with roughage or with salivation through licks and things like that. So it doesn't matter whether we're managing a feedlot or we're managing short green pick or we're managing bloat. It's all the same principles. We've got to make them salivate. These animals were born millions of years ago, and they were evolved to roam the great open savannas and eat lots of poor quality cellulose pastures that we can't digest. And so God gave them a rumen. They're not meant to have lots of green stuff in there. They've got to have a bit of roughage.
No, lovely. Well, we're on 8 o'clock now. Happy to stay online if anyone has any further questions, but otherwise, in terms of getting in contact with Jill and with Beck, we can send around those details if you have any thoughts after this. But to everyone online, thank you for joining us. Great to see plenty of people. Beck, Jill, thank you for your presentations, always insightful. Mark, thank you for your support as well. And yeah, we'll end things there. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having me.